is going to actually work out. All right, so hopefully I am recording here. All right, so we're going to talk about jQuery today and AJAX. And I also want to finish off with another example, which is local storage and session storage. So all three of these, I'm just going to say, like, I'm just going to throw these things at you. These are tools that we can use for JavaScript. These are JavaScript tools and also browser tools that we will eventually need. jQuery is probably not something we're going to absolutely use, but it does shorten the notation a lot, right? So as we said last time, when we want to grab an element, we usually have to type like document dot get element by ID or query selector all. We have to type up all of this stuff. So what jQuery actually does is let's simplify this whole process. Let everything be a CSS selector, right? Because CSS selectors allows us a lot of flexibility to grab elements already. Right. So one of the good things about jQuery is that we no longer have to worry about all the different ways that we can grab elements. We can just simply use like their notation. Right. The disadvantage of using jQuery would be that it's a new language to learn, right? So jQuery, as I said, has pretty good performance. It's just a library that we add onto JavaScript, and it cleans up the JS code a lot, right? So you're not like repeatedly typing in all of these objects dot object, right? So they're quick ways to do certain things. In order to include jQuery, we download it. So there is on the jQuery website, we can actually download a jQuery.js file. And again, this is just a library that we can use to access jQuery commands. Are we allowed to use array functions such as map for each reduce filter? Yes, you're allowed to use any of those. You can use anything that you know exists in JavaScript. I would play around with them, right? So there are ways that we can do for loops in JavaScript, right? And the assignment does allow you to play around with some of that, and definitely play around with the language. Yeah, but you can use any facet of those languages, or that language that you know. What's the biggest difference between jQuery and Angular? Do we need to know all of the input types? Okay, so we will talk about data types in JavaScript when we talk about TypeScript. So when we get into the TypeScript section, we'll come back and review all of the data types. So the basic data types you should probably know, right? So for example, JavaScript works with strings and numbers and Booleans, right? So those basic data types you should know exist. There are a lot more that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the course as well, right? So do you need to know checkboxes and radio buttons? Yeah, so in general, like the things that are in the slides and the things that we talk about in the lectures, you should definitely know them, right? So you should know that they exist, right? And so you should know the difference between what those inputs are and play around with it, right? Okay, so getting back to the question, what was the difference between jQuery and Angular? jQuery is just a library, right? So it's a library that you bring into a JS file, and you can just write stuff like this. And in fact, let's just jump over to the demo here, and I'll show you. So there's a file called jQuery1.html. In fact, yeah, so I have this already. So I've typed this up, and I have also this jQuery.min.js. So this is a file that I downloaded. This is the jQuery library, right? So you see the jQuery library is just here, right? So this is just all code that is imported into our JavaScript file, right? So we just import all of that when we look at jQuery 1, right? So we're just importing that as a script. the difference between jQuery and Angular is that Angular is a framework. So Angular needs compilation. So we need to compile our JavaScript, our Angular code into working JavaScript, right? Whereas jQuery is already in JavaScript. It's just a library in JavaScript, right? So it needs compilation. So is it similar to Tailwind for CSS? I would probably say Angular is similar to Tailwind because Tailwind needs, again, compilation. You need to compile it into the CSS language. And Angular, you need to compile it into the JavaScript language. But we'll talk about all that later. Okay, so so here we have the body and we have a button and there's a button that's labeled add and remove stuff. Okay, so every time I click on this button, I just want to run this function. Now, regardless of what this function is, right? So so here we're saying that I want to run this for loop, right? So this for loop is from I up to from 0 up to 10, and I'm going to do I plus plus every time. So this notation, if you've never seen it in Python, this notation is just saying I have indexes from 0 all the way up to 9. Right, so this is straight up indexes from 0 up to 9. So this is like in Python, this would be range 10. Right, so this would give you the for loop for range 10. And all I'm doing is I'm just outputting I within these div statements, or yeah, within this div container. Okay, so my div. So notice that my div is, this is a CSS selector. So I'm going to select my div, which is this ID right here, right? And I'm going to append this child to it, right? So if you remember our example of creating a paragraph and then attaching a content and then appending it to a div, this is basically that whole process in one line. Okay, so so this is basically that. Oh, what's I plus plus? So I plus plus is increment I every time. So what I'm saying is that this whole statement is you have a variable called I, right? You have a variable called I, and you increment I every time up to and short of 10, right? So this is equivalent to saying something like for I in range 10. Does that make sense? Okay. So you're taking all the I values from 0 all the way up to 9, right? So that's what that is. Oh, I'm sorry. You were asking about the plus I. Oh, yeah. So this is the concatenation. So this is, I'm taking this string, concatenating whatever I is, and then concatenating this. And I'm basically adding this whole thing appending it under my div, which is here. Right, so for all the numbers from 0 to 9, I'm putting it in here. Yeah. If I don't put the pluses, it does not append. So this would be incorrect syntax. Right. Yeah. There's actually better syntax for this, and I will talk about it a little bit later as well. So as we get more familiar with JavaScript, I'll throw in some more complex syntax. But for now, this is just a straight up concatenation. Yeah. This is very much like Python or other languages as well. Okay, and then if I take a look at the if I take a look at all of the kid with the .kid class, right? So you see every time I put a div, I have a kid class, and basically what this is saying is if I grab all the kids, right, and the kids have a length, so it's more than 0, then I'm going to remove the kids. Okay, so kids.remove is a function that's built into jQuery as well. Now, this is not something that you have to know. I'm just telling you that this is a function from jQuery. Okay, so it appends all these kids and then it removes all these kids when we press this button, right? So add stuff is what gets run when I click on this my button. All right, I hope that makes sense. All right, let me just show you what this looks like. So let's just open this up. And you see that we have one add remove stuff. And then when we click it, it gives me all the numbers from 0 through 9. Oh, the .kid is not a predefined class in jQuery. It's just a class that I made up. The reason why I put kid here is just this references it, right? So I wanted to know whether or not there were kids, like there were children under my div, right? So this, as long as this matches up with this class, then it's gonna work, right? So I can simply do K if I wanted to. Right. So it was just for this purpose. Right. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, when I click remove again, then it just toggles these numbers back and forth. Okay. Not very exciting. I just wanted to show you the syntax of jQuery here. The dollar sign means what the dollar sign means. Okay, so the dollar sign is essentially replacing document.query selection query selector. Yeah, so this is a query selector. So this dollar sign is on the DOM. Look for an element that is the .k. Sorry, I should say query selector all. It's equivalent to the query selector all in this case. Dot remove function is also available in JavaScript. It is not. Yeah, I don't believe it's available. It's not a built-in function in JavaScript. It is a function that's in jQuery in particular. Yeah. So the purpose of this example is not to, of course, like not to show you everything in jQuery, just to show you that jQuery actually is a shortened version, is like syntactic sugar for JavaScript, right? So if you don't want to learn a new language, right, all of this stuff could be implemented. Right, so it could be implemented from scratch. So yeah, there's nothing special about jQuery other than it's a syntax. It's a shorter syntax for doing things. Right. So I hope that makes sense. Does it work with TypeScript? Yes, it does. So we can incorporate this library into TypeScript as well. Yeah, so it does work with TypeScript. Is it good practice to write script inside of HTML file? Yes. So it depends on, so I'm guessing what you mean by this is putting the script tag directly into the body. And I would say like yes and no. There are advantages and disadvantages for writing a script tag directly in the body. So here you can see that if you have a script tag that's labeling something that you're about to do, right? That's good readability, I would say. Right. So if you put a script tag here, it indicates that this script goes with this, right? So if you have a longer page and you have more elements in there, you would probably say, yeah, you can put multiple scripts next to the elements, right? Now there's another area there. Sorry, there's another uh, like another thought where you can say, well, no, just to keep everything organized, you should put a script at the very beginning, right? That's where you should put the script, right? So there's no, I wouldn't say it's right or wrong one way or another. I've seen people do either, and there are arguments for and against, right? So I wouldn't say one way is right and one way is wrong. Yeah. Is there any external way to write the jQuery? External way. What do we mean by external way? Do you mean in like importing this jQuery library? Is that what you mean by external way? All right. So while we answer that, I'll go back and And by the way, if the answer is yes, right? If you mean by external way, like importing the library, you can actually import it from a content delivery network, right? A CDN, right? So instead of downloading the file and incorporating the file into your project, you can actually link this very much like Bootstrap to a CDN, right? I just chose to download the file in this case. Yeah. So if that was the question, then yes, there is an external link that we can link the jQuery library. Okay. But let me know if I've answered the question. All right. So let's go back to the slides very quickly. And this may be great, right? So I put a few more examples here. You can play around with those examples, but it's good to be able to, put in a node and to remove a node, but JavaScript already does all of that like pretty effectively. So I would probably say in terms of in terms of jQuery, the only reason I would ever use jQuery would be to use something like AJAX, right? So I would say by far AJAX is the best part of jQuery. Now, again, what I'm about to show you is possible in vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so I'm not saying it's not possible in vanilla JavaScript because after all, jQuery is just a library. It's just so much of a hassle to do it with vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so the how AJAX works is, let's pretend that we are filling out a form. Okay, so we're filling out a form here. We have a browser and we have a country that we want to select. So when we select Canada and we click update, or even if we don't click update, what I want to do is update all of these states, right? So all of these states are going to be updated. So to, Alberta, British Columbia, and so on, right? And then if I click on United States, again, if I click on update, or if I just simply click on United States, I want to have all the states from the US be populated here. So obviously we don't want to make a call. We don't want a new page, right? All I want to do is I want to update the DOM to reflect this. Now we've just talked about how to do selection, right? So this is nothing more than a selection box that's a dropdown. So all I want to do is to take some data and to populate all of the options, right? So again, if you missed what I said there, all I really want is, you see all these options in here, right? Depending on what the person selects as a country, I want to fill these options in different ways. I want to remove, or I want to add to these options accordingly. We've already talked about how to remove, how to add and remove things on the DOM, right? So let's talk about how we would make this how we would make this call. Now, what's the problem right now? The problem is that every time we refresh a page, the page goes blank, right? So what we don't want is when we click on Canada, for the whole page to refresh, to go blank, and then this thing to pop up. Because otherwise, why don't we just make a new page for it, right? So why don't we make a page for Canada? Why don't we make a page for the US, right? We can make 4 pages depending on which country we select here, right? I hope you understand what I'm trying to say, right? So instead, what we do is we use JavaScript in order to populate these states dynamically for us, right? So so the problem is that every time we go to a page, right, and I refresh, you see that there's a moment in time where there's like a little bit of a white, right, when it's loading. Right, this one is really fast because this is actually a local page, right? But if we go on the internet, right, the loading time might take maybe like half a second, right, where the page goes blank, and we don't really want that to happen. All right, does everyone get the problem? Sorry, there was a question. Can we take a new file just for jQuery code and link it to our HTML? Yeah, I think that's what we were doing, right? Yeah. So you can alter the jQuery code however you want, right? So yeah. So if the question is, can we alter the code, or can we just download the code and use it? This was actually what I did here. So I'll upload it, and hopefully that answers the question. Okay, I thought the reason we don't want to refresh the whole page is because you have a very large table with thousands of rows. You will really start getting bad lag. Yes, that would be another reason for it. Yeah, so if your data is somewhere else and you have a large amount of data, right? Again, you don't want to refresh your page every time. Or if there's only like a small amount of data that you need to update, right? So let's say like mainly my whole page looks pretty good, but there's like a small amount, like a small part which is dynamic. Maybe it's the time, right? So maybe once in a while, I want to make a call over to a server, and let's go to a new page here. So all I want to do is go to a web server, and depending on what the web server sends back as a response, I want to update my page accordingly. Right, so that's really the purpose of what AJAX is for. Okay. Can you use jQuery in a external JavaScript file? Yes, you can. Yes. So if you take a look here, yeah. So instead of writing sorry, not this one. Yeah, instead of writing our script here, right, we could have just replaced this with a script tag, right? That is an external script. Right. Yeah. So this could have been just an external script, and I could have put the script tag here, and it would work exactly in the same way. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, where were we? Yeah. So let's take a look at the solution really quickly. In AJAX, we have we can do like again get a element, and then dot text means I want to replace the text inside that element, and here is the main command. Okay, so we have AJAX, and then we give some URL. So what is the data that we want to collect? Okay, and then when there's a success, what do we do? When there's an error, what do we do? And the success is corresponding to a function. You don't have to call it callback function, right? You can call it whatever you want, but that callback function is called when the data comes back, right? When you grab the data, what do you want to do with the data? So here I'm just sending out the data, and on the other side here, if there's an error, I'm just producing the error. So I'm just writing out the error. Okay. So the fetch function is right here, is under the URL. So I'll show you a full example in 1 second. So if you take a look at this, I'll go to users. Users, I actually have, I have actually put the session storage stuff in here as well. But here, you see that users HTML. So here I have an ID called click me. Okay, so I have an ID called click me. And when I click, I'm going to start the AJAX. And this AJAX is going to send a call over to this URL, HTTP, and then worldtimeapi.org. And then let me just show you on the browser what this looks like. So when I send this call to the server, it's going to give me back this data. Right, so this data is actually corresponding to the time, the current time that we have in the Pacific time zone. Right, so this is Pacific time zone. Now there are other time zones that you can replace this with, right? So anyways, I'm not gonna go into that in too much detail, a little bit in too much detail. But basically what AJAX is doing is it is sending this, it's sending a call to this URL. Okay, so it's sending a call to this URL. It's saying that the data type is JSON. Now, if we look closely, that the response that we're getting is actually JSON, is actually a JSON. So here's our squiggly bracket, right? It's saying that the abbreviation is -05. The client IP is this, right? So this is the client, this is the IP that I'm sending it with. Here's the date time, right? So this is the time of the week, day of the year, and so on. Right, so it gives me the exact time. And every time we send a request, notice that it's going to send me back something slightly different. So if you take a look at the time, right? So if you take a look at this time, if I send another request right now, you'll see that it changes, right? So it changes a little bit as I send this request again, right? So this is the dynamic behavior that's happening, okay? And JSON, earlier we mentioned, is it stands for, yeah, JavaScript object notation. right? So JavaScript object notation is what I'm expecting the data to be in. Like this is the form of the data that I expect to be in. I expect to have an object that's returned in JavaScript form. And so that data is now we're going to use it to send it to the callback function. Okay, so whatever data that we get in return, I'm going to send it back to the data to the callback function, right? So the callback function, it's expecting a parameter called data. And I'm going to take this data and I'm going to print out the UTC date time, right? So UTC date time is, where is it? Right here. So UTC date time, I expect to print out this value, right? When I do that call. Okay, so let's go through the whole thing of what it looks like. So here we have a click me button. Okay, I'm going to talk about this other button in a second, but let's take a look at users. So where is this? Oh, where do I have this? I don't have this. Oops. Okay, so let me actually copy this. I don't have this under users. Okay, let me create a new file here. We'll call it users.html, and I'll just copy this in here. All right, so let's run this. And you see here that we have a click me, right? And when I click, I want the AJAX to be called, right? So I'm when I do the ugh, sorry, I have files everywhere. Okay, this is not the one. Okay, this one. So when I click on this button, start AJAX, I'm first going to send an AJAX call. I'm going to send the AJAX call to this URL. It's going to be data type JSON. When I get some data back, I'm going to run this. So my div.text is now going to have this line in there. Okay, so remember the dot text is the inner text. Okay, so it's going to grab this element, and the inner text is now going to be whatever I have here. All right, does that make sense so far? Okay, now you'll also notice this first line here. So click me is this button. So as I click on this button, the text will be replaced by calling world time server. Okay, so it'll be replaced with that. So so let's go into, oh, I know what happened. It's I was supposed to take a look at ajax.html. Sorry. All right. So anyways, we'll take a look at okay, so what is data.utp time? So the data that we're getting back, right? So the data that we're getting back is this thing right here. Okay, this is the data that we're going to get in return. And the UTC datetime is one of the properties in this object. Okay, so let's run this and we'll see, as I click on it, you'll see momentarily that it'll say calling the server. And then once it gets back the result, you see it prints it out in the div right below it. So you see we have this my div, right? Sorry, my div is this, right? And my div is now going to contain the result and then the time. So if I do click me again, right, it'll say that. And if I click me again, it'll give me the new time, right? So this is the time that that I will get for every time I make that request. Is AJAX part of JQuery? Yes. So AJAX is a JQuery function that you can call. Yes. So it's an implementation within AJAX. It's actually using an engine that's in JavaScript to make fetch calls to a URL. Right. It just makes it so much easier to do so. Yeah. So as I said, there are other ways to do this, but I would say, if you're using jQuery, probably the best reason for using jQuery would be AJAX, right? Um, okay. So let's finish off today by talking about session storage and local storage. So let's go back to our slides very quickly. So this is talking about HTML5 storage. So the example that I gave, and I'm going to give, I'm going to go back to the example here. So this is part of the file that I'm going to upload. So here, notice at the bottom here, when I run this script, I'm also running session storage and local storage. And basically what these things are is a way that we can store some values. So you may have noticed that there's really no way to store variables. If I use a variable in JavaScript, it's going to be gone the next time I reload that page, right? So session storage allows me to be able to store values. And so this is just a very quick example to show that I have session storage and set item, right? Or I can just do session storage dot first name or whatever the item is called, and then name it, right? So both of these are ways that I can set a session storage. I'll show you what that looks like in 1 second. There's also this thing called local storage. Now, the difference between a session storage and a local storage is that local storage is it's persistent. So even if you close your browser and you open it up later on, the local storage will still be there. Whereas the session storage only exists for that session. So once you close your browser, then that is going to be gone. So you can play around with that. So that's the only difference between session and local. Okay, I would generally say use session storage if it's not something that like you need forever, right? So local storage would be like I'm saving this value for forever, basically, until somebody goes in and deletes it. So here I have a function called display, and I have another button, right? So I'm going to call this function called display, and I'm going to put everything in my div2. So I'm just going to take all of these things and put it in my div2. Okay. Okay. So let's run this again. So when I click display, oh, sorry, I'm not displaying everything. I'm only displaying the user. Sorry. So I'm displaying the user, but these are ways that I can grab the other values as well. Okay. So I can probably add more stuff in here, right? So I'll let you play around with that code. But the thing I want to show you is if we do an inspect very quickly, and we go to the inspector, there is a application, right? So we can go to application, and in application, you'll see that under local storage, I have this username, right? So I have this username, Bobby C. And if I go into session storage, you'll see that I have first name as well as today's date. All right, so those are values that are stored in the browser. And as I said, the difference between a session storage is that when we close this browser and we open it up, session storage will be wiped, but the local storage will still be there. Session storage is more like caching stuff. I would probably say so. Yeah. Yeah. Session storage and local storage is, where is it stored? It's stored in the it's stored in where the memory where the browser keeps its memory, right? So if you close up the browser, if it's a local storage, it will keep it in hard drive, right? So in wherever it needs to, yeah, wherever it's stored. Whereas the session storage will just be wiped, right? So it's going to be in memory. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Is line 28 the first? So if we take a look at line 28, yes, line 28 is the first time it is declared, it is used. Yeah. And by the way, if you're using older versions of the browsers and session storage doesn't exist, then you won't be able to use session storage. But nowadays, every browser has that, right? Yeah. Browser memories are cookies. No, cookies are different things. So I won't talk about cookies in this course, but basically it is storage that is associated with your browser, but cookies are initiated by the server, right? So you can't just tell the browser to store a cookie. Okay, so it's not JavaScript, it's server-side technology, right? So it's server-side that needs to initiate that, even though it's stored on the browser. So we'll talk about that in Web 2, but I don't think in this course we'll need cookies. Do we have to import anything to use session storage? No, we don't. Yeah. So session storage is actually built in. So it's a newer standard within, well, new meaning like within the past 5 or 6 years. But it's yeah, it's already in the browser. It's part of JavaScript. Is there any difference in the usage for session storage variables and regular JS variables? So for session storage, I would say use it for anything that you need to keep for a later point in time, right? So you can close a tab, for example, and the session storage will still persist, right? So if you need it from tab to tab, then use a session storage. Yeah, but the variables are they are scoped, right? So so function scoped or block scoped, right? They will disappear. Yeah. So session storage can be used on other pages as well. Yes, it can. Right. So we'll see actually some examples of that. Yeah. So we can use a session storage to it's probably not the best way to pass data from page to page. So in Angular, we'll talk about better ways to do that. But yes, this is one way that we can use it for. If you write a login, you should not be using a session storage. Yeah, that's probably not something that you should be using just because it's not secure and because you can see it, right? So you can see it directly here. And another thing is the person can change it, right? So so use it for like non-secure things. And we're going to talk a lot more about this in Web 2. Yeah, but for now, just know that it's there and that we can use it. Are they serialized or will they be converted to a string when the page is refreshed? They are serialized for storage, right? So when you grab it out of storage, it will automatically deserialize, and everything is done within JavaScript. Yeah, and we don't have to know about deserialization or serialization just yet, but yeah, but that's how it's stored. Okay. Good. I hope that's helpful. I don't think anything we talked about today is pertinent to the assignment. So, but it's just some facts that I'm throwing out at you. Okay, so we'll say that this is kind of the cutoff for the midterm. So yeah, just very quickly. Sorry, I know we're running late here. So the midterm will be on Wednesday. So take a look at the midterm info that I posted. There will be some of you who are going to be in a different classroom than others. So please make sure that you check it's going to be by last name. So check your last name and check the classroom that you're going to. We have another class on Monday, but as I said, nothing on Monday's class will be on the midterm. I would say like today's class will be the cutoff for the midterm. Okay, so the midterm is going to be 50 minutes long. And yeah, yeah, you don't have to use jQuery. So jQuery is something I threw out there, but you should probably know what it is, right? So you should know what jQuery is, but unlikely that I will say like write a jQuery function that does this, right? So something like that. For Monday's class, I will send out another email. So right now, I haven't received any updates on the strike yet. So yeah, so let me let me get the update and then I'll send it out a little bit later this week. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, the jQuery, anything in jQuery, I probably won't make it like application wise, although you should know, for example, what AJAX is, right? You should know what jQuery is. Yeah, but the specifics, I don't see it being asked. Yeah. The midterm is going to be on paper. Yes. Yeah, it's going to be in person and paper. Yeah, so the midterm will be in person regardless of whether there's still a strike on Wednesday. Yeah. So I've made arrangements for this already. Yeah. Okay. All right, so the practice questions are in the midterm info section, so you can have a look at that, and that's a little bit longer of a question than, of course, you would see on the midterm, but it's definitely good practice. You can take a lot of the concepts out of that, and yeah, that would be very helpful. So HTML, JavaScript, CSS, I would probably say so. Yeah, yeah, we didn't really talk about much more than those three things. Yeah, so HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. All right, cool. Um, so how much depth should we know about JavaScript? So definitely know the stuff that we talked about in the class. Like practice with JavaScript. Like yeah, I would probably say on the level as of what the practice question is asking about, and yeah, and how to use it. Yeah. So know about events, right? Know what events are, know what callback functions are, and so forth, right? Um, how much attention should be? Well, we on the first topic we did spend about a week, so I would probably say proportionally that's how much you'll see on the midterm, right? So I proportionally will it will say, that's how much, we did about 6 weeks of stuff, or 1 out of 6, something like that. Yeah. All right. So let's hope that everything will be settled very soon, and there won't be any problems with like getting back into the classroom or anything like that. Okay. So yeah, if there are any other questions, uh, email me or Discord me or anything like that. What portion of the test is coding? I would probably say 1 or 2 questions of the test is coding. That's not really saying too much, right? But yeah, you would probably see 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, there's a mixture of theoretical and practical questions. Okay. All right. So if there are no other questions, thank you very much. I hope everything is good. I hope you guys are still okay with these online sessions. We'll hope to get back into class as soon as possible. Okay. I will upload the demo code right now. Okay. So as I'm talking, I am pushing it up to Git. Okay. So you can look for it there. Okay. All right. Thank you.